Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul?
and Jolene. And today we're talking about
Traps. Well, realistic danger,
in your game.
semicolon, traps. Yeah, in your game. So, I've been playing since, everybody knows, probably, since way back in 1970s, late 70s. And traps haven't been a big thing in my game. I remember in AD&D, there was basically a save for traps. There was this table that had all your saves on it. It was dependent on your class, and it was dependent on your level. So like fighters and something else were all grouped together. Wizards were grouped together, and then clerics, and then they all had all these saves. Like save versus staves, no, staves, wands, and something else. And then they had magic saves, and I think one of them was traps because they didn't have the AD&D wasn't like fifth edition is today. So there was just this one save that you would make, and you failed or you made it, and and some of these traps were really deadly. So I don't think my brother liked traps. I don't remember him ever using a trap. Possibly, the poison treasure chest needle trap or something like that. But I don't remember any like, the classic pitfall traps, any stuff like that. So I'm not big into traps. I don't think I've ever used a trap on you guys, have I?
I don't know.
In our many years of playing so far? No. And then another thing, problem I had was that I always thought that they were unrealistic because long ago, I remember this series of books called Grimtooth Book of Traps. And I forget what number they got up to. Like I remember 1, 2, and 3, but it might have gone higher than that. And it was sold by Flying Buffalo, I think. I remember going to the conventions and seeing the Grimtooth book, and I was, amazed because they have all these little sketches and drawings of the traps and how they would work, and these little stick figures falling into these horrible ways of dying, and I thought they were pretty cool, but I didn't think I could use them realistically in my game for whatever reason.
I think it's hard to use them because, well, one, the old way of figuring out if there was a trap was you just had to, I'm going to search for a trap.
Yes,
Are there traps in
this
this room?
the GM that.
Yes. And there was no rhyme or reason to where the trap would be. But there was probably an idea that there would be a trap.
Well, I think back then, for some reason, I think back then for some reason, you had to give a clue that this might be a good place for a trap, because otherwise, if you had a thief, and that's what they were called back then, he would be bothering the heck out of you, checking every 10 feet or wherever you're going, right? Let's say it's a dungeon or a keep or a goblin warren or whatever, and every 10 feet I'm going to check for a trap. So in this case, back then, probably the GM would roll, because you would roll, and if you succeeded, and there was no trap, you said you detect no traps. But if there is a trap and you failed, you say you detect no traps. But if the player rolls, right, then he knows that he failed, and that he doesn't quite trust his roll. Where though some people back then probably said, well, you're not too sure, but you don't think there's a trap. The GMs would give you that kind of information, which just as a player would just drive me nuts, right? Because then I'm like, well, did I roll right, or did I roll high, or is he trying to tell me something? I think back then there would have to be a place that would be a good place for a trap, right? In the description that the GM is giving you. Otherwise, you're just gonna the thief is okay. 10 feet. Okay, I'm gonna take 10 minutes to detect your traps. I'm like, oh my god, and it's. I think it would just be mad.
It would be a very slow dungeon crawl.
It would be a dungeon crawl. Yes, very much so. So I didn't really think it was realistic back then. I didn't think it was realistic. I was a kid. I didn't know. And then as I grew up, and I saw movies and read books and stuff like that, I realized that traps have always been part of certain cultures and then certain ways of warfare. You think about different ways that traps are utilized, and for me, it's always been that pit trap, right? But I always thought they used those for animals, right? But I guess you could use it for a human, and I guess in certain areas where there was war and there's a retreating army or a group of people, rebels, whatever you want to call them, patriots, and they're retreating, then they want to make it difficult for the advancing army or group of people who are moving in on them, and so they leave little traps behind. Probably not necessarily to what it would be to try to win the war in this, or the battle in a certain sense, but maybe change the morale of the people chasing them, or even just slow them down a little bit, right? Because if they're apprehensive about, the booby traps that you set up, that might give you a better chance of escaping if that's what's going on.
I think that Indiana Jones
Yes.
is like the perfect reason or idea of why traps exist in dungeons or tombs or whatever, because you're searching for treasure, right? Or you're searching to clear out stuff, but everybody wants to take the stuff of the...
Yeah, I was thinking that it wasn't realistic, even watching Indiana Jones, and that one's a little bit, kind of crazy realistic, they had traps that worked on shadow and stuff like that, which, hey, there's a little bit of mysticism in that movie. Anyway, obviously, what was really interesting to me is that I was watching a documentary on Tutankhamun, and in fact, his tomb had trapped. It had the classic, a big old block would fall and trap people in, mainly robbers, right? So in tombs, it makes sense that if they're going to put a lot of expensive stuff in tombs, i.e. anything in D&D, the Dragon Lich or the Draco Lich, whatever, and he wants to protect his stuff, he's going to set up traps, and it's totally believable. Because in real life, people did that. I mean, real people set up tombs and design traps to prevent people from robbing them. Not maybe as elaborate as, Indiana Jones, but still, they were there, and I think that's pretty cool.
But are traps a good idea for running a game?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't think any of you have ever, in my games that I've run, and mainly because I never put a trap in, you guys never have detected for traps, right?
That's not true, because
Yeah, have you?
when there's chests and stuff like that, they always detect for traps or to see if there's magic or detect magic, different things like that.
Yes, I don't remember that being done in some of the games where there's actual.
And then they use their mage
chest.
hand to open it instead of themselves.
Okay, well, so they're precautious, right? They're taking precautions. I mean,
and there's a reason for that. I think it has to do with the fact that in a lot of times, if you do not detect the trap, something bad is going to happen.
Right. So, I mean, I think in the back of some players' minds, as soon as they see a treasure chest,
that's a treasure chest.
People get all worried, right? Especially if it's just a treasure chest and it's just sitting there, or I love the idol in
Indiana
Jones' this little ray of sun coming and hitting this treasure chest, and it's kind of glowing, and it's all by itself, and the only thing that's that's separating you and the treasure chest is what? Maybe a fire pit?
No, it's a bunch of steps.
No, a 10-foot fire pit, which, makes you want to jump over and die.
Oh, I'm thinking just the steps, like in Indiana Jones. You had to pay attention to which step you stepped on.
Oh yeah.
And that's also and there's a reason. There's the old Tomb of Horrors game.
The adventure, yes. The crazy one made by
Gary Gygax.
You know what was weird is that I've never played in a game like that. I never played in any kind of thing where it was just full of traps. Felipe, my mentor, my older brother Felipe, who ran most of our first games, we probably ran for a solid couple years at least, from 1978 to about 1980, and then we found other people to play with, and then he got to play with us, and then separate from that, I would start running games, and Sip would start running games, and we would pass the GM badge, or not badge, but the GM badge around. We each got a badge when we were GM. But he never did it. He never put a lot of traps in his game, and I can't remember any trap that really did anything like damage to a lot of people or any of the characters. So I grew up with that idea that traps are something really rare and something really that aren't very useful in my game.
But that's only because you played with Felipe.
Other people, I'm sure, are like, they're dungeon delving the whole time, and they see that Grimtooths book of traps, and then, oh my god, this is exactly what I want, right? This is, and these traps are, you saw some of the elaborate traps that they have in those books. There's these, like, a trap where the stairs slide, they become a slide, and then everybody slides into a pit of stakes, and then there's a few people that are able to hang on or whatever. It does a spring loaded thing, and it shoots the players onto a wall that has stakes, and it's just really elaborate and really funny. I remember my first game con at Pacificon way back, and I don't remember the year exactly. It's probably 1982, 83, and we were working for security, which in that back then they actually gave us a room, which is the only way we could afford to go. So they gave us a room for working an 8-hour shift and then a 6-hour shift or something like that. It was 4 people to the room. Me and Felipe, we were together, obviously. And then we were supposed to have these 2 other guys, but one guy was, I'm going to stay with my friends. So we only had this one old dude, but we stayed with him in our room. And and that was my first experience, he loves Grimtooth. He comes in and goes, oh, Grimtooth came out with another book or something like that. I'm like, oh, what's that? And he's like showing me, he goes, this is fantastic. And I'm like, oh, yeah, those are pretty cool. It was like these really elaborate things, and I'm like, where or how would I put that or utilize those in my game? And it never did.
Well, a lot of people do.
It seems like the trap is like a D&D like staple, right?
Well, yeah, and I was looking stuff up, and my friend Mike likes this guy called the Angry DM. Angry GM.
The Angry GM.
Yes, and he wrote a whole article on why traps suck in D&D.
Well, he has to live up to the name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but his thing is that do you really want somebody checking for traps every 5 steps?
Exactly. That's the old AD&D style.
Do you want to have your players so leery of walking into a room because nobody detected the trap and it went off and everybody took 20 hit points of damage or something?
Right.
Or they're held in this giant room in spider webs or something. I mean, who wants to play a game like that? Is it fun for the players? Is it fun for the GM?
I think it depends on the players, right? If the players really like, because this is the thing, right? I think if they're puzzle solvers, and I'm a terrible puzzle solver, so I probably wouldn't like it. So it's the puzzle solver players, right? They like figuring things out, and if they're good at it, every trap has a way around it, theoretically, right? Or
yes.
Or else it's not a good trap. So they, as a player and as a character, they're figuring out, how is this character gonna, figure this out? What are we missing? What information do we need? Kind of like a puzzle, but also kind of like an investigation into a murder. You're trying to get all the clues that's gonna give you the murderer. In this case, gonna give you the clues that's gonna get you around this trap. And that's a problem, right? For me, is that sometimes I don't think logically enough. I don't think, well, this is the way the trap works, and if they do this is, and all these things that could happen, they could bypass the trap. They could not only bypass, but what do you call it? Disarm a trap. If there's a trigger of some sort. To me, I just thought it was too much work, and I really didn't think that my players, any of them, would really love that kind of gameplay. It seemed to me like old players, like back who played in the 70s, who were really dungeon crawlers. Even to this day, there's people that are like that. They love that kind of gameplay. And I'm not much into that, so I don't use a lot of traps.
Well, obviously people still use traps because in D&D 5th edition, they have a section on it and how that they've changed it completely.
Right.
It's kind of convoluted, according to the Angry GM.
The Angry GM, yes.
But now players if you have certain skills, I'm going to assume investigation and stuff like that.
Right. You get like a passive perception check.
You have a passive perception.
Right.
Or if you roll a 10 for regular perception, you can tell if there's a trap.
Oh, all you need is a 10.
You notice a trap. And then the GM lets them know that there's a trap there. And then there's all these ways players have special skills now to be able to detect how to undo the trap or how to stop that kind of thing.
Or how to bypass the trap, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not really so much into traps. I didn't even know if it was covered in any of the 3 core books. So I looked it up, and sure enough, there's a nice big section about traps and how to put them in your game, how they work, and then they give you quite a good list of different types of traps. Some that are there to to slow you down, and then there's traps that are there to cause damage and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, oh wow, that was new to me. When I was reading the rules, I just must have skipped that section because I don't remember ever seeing it.
I think that it makes it more exciting if you're playing an Indiana Jones kind of get the treasure game.
Ah, yes.
Or
if you're tomb robbing, right?
Yeah, or if you're trying to steal something from a dragon and his hoard, or you've been
worried about the dragon.
Yeah, I would too. But or if you're trying to get an artifact or something like that, it would make sense.
I think as a character player, I mean, if I was playing in the game and there's whatever it is, and it ends in the word tomb, I definitely would be worried about traps.
Or it has the Tomb of Horrors.
Oh yeah, if the tomb is if at all involved in the title.
Well, I had always heard that. I would never actually.
What, the Tomb of Horrors?
Yeah, I've never actually seen it. Or
I think Sip and Esteban bought it, though we never went through it back when we were playing AD&D.
But when the last sci-fi convention, no, not sci-fi convention, Comic-Con that we went to, Luke Gygax was there, and he ran people through the Tomb of Horrors in a game, and it was hilarious. And well, recently I had bought the
Tomb of Annihilation.
No, the Tales of the Yawning Portal.
Oh yeah.
And it's in there, Tomb of Horrors, and the map is there.
Revised.
And it was pretty funny to having sat through that gaming session. It wasn't like a really long gaming session because they died.
They played for like 90 minutes?
I don't even know if it was 90 minutes.
60 minutes.
I think it could have been 90 minutes, but it went by really fast.
It went by super fast.
Hilarious. And
yeah,
just the fact that the characters knew they weren't gonna. There was like a 0 point something chance they might make it.
Well, what's funny is because Tomb of Horrors is like the ultimate killer dungeon, right? I mean, it was known back. I think they used it.
Well, Gary Gygax had made this out of his campaign that he did with his players, and then at the first Origins convention, they put it out as they must have mimeographed it or something.
Well, they used it as
a play, like not a play test, but
a contest.
Yeah, they did a contest with it,
and so you would get certain points for surviving so long or getting to a certain point.
Well, the funny thing is,
you would win a prize, I guess, if you got the most.
Well, just getting into the Tomb of Horrors, there's only 3 entrances, and only one of them actually gets you in anywhere. The other 2 just kill you once you get inside of them.
They're traps.
And it's funny. This is a spoiler alert in case you've never heard the game or seen the scenario, but it's in a hill, and there's no way to get up to the entrances. You have to figure out how to get to the entrances.
Right.
And they're only on one side of the hill, the north side, I believe. And it was just funny to get the people up to them. Of course, these people knew that the entrances had to be there.
Yes.
But the first one they went into, they died right away because it was the wrong entrance. It wasn't the whole party, but
yes.
So they started over.
It was funny because Luke obviously has run this quite a few times because he had this old battered one that he's had since he was a kid,
right?
And which was pretty cool. And he had a little note for his game, and this was the first room that they got into, and it was a false entrance, right? And it was a total trap. And then like
once you got in and got in so far, then the door behind a big giant
big slab of granite would fall behind them. And trapped them, and
that's it. There's no way out.
Limited air, and they would basically die. And so, what was funny is like after the big stone fell, and the players who are behind it or in the trap are like, "Oh, what are we gonna do?" And they're trying to do all these spells to try to move it. He goes, "No, it's too big. It's too heavy. I can't levitate it. Nope. How much?" And these are like high level characters. Usually they can levitate more if they're higher level, and he goes, nope, it weighs too much. And then after they try to do stuff for like maybe 5 or 6 minutes, he goes, basically you guys are dead, so let's start all over.
Let's try again.
It was super funny. And so then they try again.
So it's a Tomb of Horrors. They're all traps. Once they even got into the real entrance.
Oh yes.
Then walking down the hallway was Danger Will Robinson. And it was like and I'm looking at the map of it, and the traps are everywhere. Few steps.
Everywhere.
And there's things that come out of the wall. There's bricks that, or if you step on it, you go down a slide into a pit.
Into a different room.
I'm like going, but I can see how that would be exciting for people to try to, that it even says on it, there's that only high level players are going to get through this. Maybe.
Right. Even then, that doesn't guarantee that they're going to live.
So it'd be interesting. We had talked about redoing things on a recent episode about players wanting to redo their, what was it? It was a crypt or something.
Yeah, so it's exactly a crypt.
So I could see something like this really dangerous game where there's traps and stuff, and as you would want to do it several times so you could learn where all the traps were, so that one of your future characters might be able to get through it.
Yeah, we just did it on backtracking, and so in this case, you would allow it. You would allow characters to come back from the dead and try again.
Or I think so. Maybe different characters.
Well, how many high-level characters do you have?
Well, you can make a new one.
Oh, just make them up.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I guess that's possible. So when we were watching that, Luke Gygax run these, they were industry people, right? They weren't just regular schmoes like us. They go to conventions. They were like people who, cartoonists or artists and all kinds.
All of them were D&D players, though.
Oh yeah. They all had played D&D. Well, we were at a Comic-Con convention, so probably the number of people who play role-playing games is pretty high, I'm sure. So it was really fun. I thought it was really interesting, and I really liked how Luke, he's just smiling the whole time because he knows that these guys are in for a terrible time to try to successfully go. And I think they only got as far as maybe one room? They actually got into a room.
Yeah.
One room. And I forget what it was really. And then by the description of the room, I go, oh, God, I would hate this. Because it was like a puzzle.
Yeah.
I don't know. A Tomb of Horrors. I've heard of it since I was a kid. And you're right. I think it was, I forget what it was called. There was a contest that they used it, that they ran people through it. And
it was at Origins.
Origins, right.
I think it was 1978, it said, or something.
Wow.
Like that.
That's pretty early. So I think, when did it, I know you were researching the Tomb of Horrors. Do you know when it was published? 81, I think. The AD&D version. It's pretty well known.
I can tell you. Just give me a second.
Yeah. So it's pretty well known that the Tomb of Horrors is like the epitome of a trap-filled dungeon. And it's been super popular. I think a lot of people who played AD&D back in the day bought it.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. I bought it, and it was, like I said, it was a really popular module.
So it says in the 1970s, the first version of the adventure was crafted for Gary Gygax's personal campaign in the early 1970s, and went to be featured in the official Dungeons and Dragons event at the original Origins gaming convention in 1975.
Wow!
The first publication of the Tomb of Horrors as part of the advanced D&D game came in 1978.
Wow, that's very early.
Yeah.
Holy cow. 1978. Yeah, so that's pretty way early. It came out. It was published when I started playing D&D.
Yeah.
And when we started playing D&D, we were still using original D&D because, we lived in a little town and new stuff didn't come to us very quickly.
That was a long time ago.
Yes. So what do you think about traps? Do you think they're a viable thing to put into your campaign or into your adventures?
I think that I wouldn't use them very often.
Right. You probably use them sparingly. Unless it was a tomb.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think I would also, if people were going to go into the tomb, I would make sure that they knew there were traps or could be traps, right?
You could forecast that. Is that forecast? Is that what you would say?
The lore says, or
right.
People have gone in there and haven't come out.
Or that you would just say, like people know about the pyramids of Egypt being trapped, right? They say the builders of the tomb made sure that robbers would not be able to find it by building and inventing ingenious evil traps to kill and maim any would-be robber, right? And so you give that, I guess it's forecasting or foreboding, or I don't know what you want to call it.
Information.
Information. The GM could, give that information out as legend or something like that. And that would always be in the back of the mind of the players. Hopefully, unless they're like, doity. That's, they don't.
Well, another thing you could do is, as they enter the tomb, there could be like skeletons with things sticking through them.
Oh, kind of like Indiana Jones.
Yeah. So just right. As a clue, a small clue.
A small clue, a dead skeleton, a really dead skeleton. Pinned against the wall with a bunch of
course, knowing our players, they would be looking to see if the skeleton was going to come alive and start attacking them.
Or if he was carrying anything, right?
That's
Valuable.
true. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I've never really been a trap GM, and when I've encountered them as a player, usually it was, I don't usually play a thief, or I didn't play a thief back then.
So you were bored as the thief was searching for the traps?
We didn't really have a thief. Like I said, Felipe didn't put a lot of traps into his game, and then therefore none of us did. It's like the model, right? Whoever you play with, that becomes your model of the way you play. I know I'm getting off the territory here of the subject, but Felipe was he still is a very upstanding, forthright person, and he's, like I said, he attained Eagle Scout, and he's an epitome of a Boy Scout, right? He's do good deeds. I forget what the motto of the Boy Scout. I think it's prepared, but anyway, doesn't matter. But he is the epitome of a Boy Scout. So his games were always about us defeating evil. We never allowed us to play evil characters, and so he influenced us in that way. At least our core group. I'm going way off. I remember we started playing at the Scout House because they had a little behind American Legion Hall. They had this little. It was more than a shack. It was like this little building that had little places that you can meet into, little rooms that you could have the different packs could go into and do different, whatever, have separate meetings, and then they have a large area where they could all meet and talk and have meetings of whatever. So we had a big group, and one of them was this guy called Stan, and Stan was a super nice guy. He was a Boy Scout, and that's how he got into the game because he knew my brother. And he was in my high school, and Stan played a chaotic, evil dwarf, right? And he was like, compared to our characters, he was like super high level, like 10th level or something like that. And he was super crazy, right? This dwarf. The player was crazy too. I mean, not the player was crazy, but he played this dwarf like a chaotic, evil dwarf, right? So he'd be killing things left and right, and he would threaten you if you, hey, dude, calm down, you don't have to kill that monster or that innocent person. He goes, why? He goes, they got money. And he was this greedy, terrible character. Years later, when we were adults, I run into him, and because we were teenagers, and I go, oh, do you still play D&D? And he goes, oh no. He goes, my church, I finally decided I shouldn't play church. He goes, yeah. He goes, oh yeah. He goes, I'm a Christian. I go, oh, were you going to church back then? He goes, yeah. I go, well, what about your character? And he goes, oh, that's just a character, dude. And that's how he talked. He goes like, that's just a character. That's not me. I was just still playing whatever. And I'm like, wow, he really separated himself from this character. Well, I don't know, maybe he did or didn't. Maybe it was secretly expressing his wanton will for destruction. But my brother wasn't like that, right? And so we played Dudley Do Right characters, right? We were always trying to do the good thing, and that's the way I've always run games. I've always run games in that light, that the characters are good. I don't allow evil characters, and so on and so on. I think that's why traps haven't been a big thing in my games, because they weren't a big thing in his games. And that's, you are what you learn from. And when you first learn stuff from people, that's how you learn to do it. And that's what you think is the right way to do it. Later on, you go, oh, well, maybe, you shouldn't just play yourself in a different world. You could explore playing different facets of personalities that aren't yours and stuff like that. And yeah, sure. But back then we were playing we were playing ourselves in a fantasy world. And luckily for us, we weren't playing with some person who wanted to explore the darker, pieces of his psyche, right?
Saul's heard horror stories about this.
And so we were really a group of players that just were like having fun. You hear these horrors, and and all of us were guys. I hate to say it. And some people out there claim that oh no, D&D never excluded women. Well,
you didn't have any women to play with.
We didn't. Yeah, and I don't know if we didn't exclude them. I would have been happy to have a girl play with us. In fact, I think Mike tried to get his girlfriend from high school to play, and she was adamantly did not want to play. Right? She's like, oh no, and I think she might have even gone as far as made a character, but then she did not want to play. And I'm like, I remember that was like not a contention, but he goes, oh come, because we spent a lot of time playing, and so that was always a pull for Mike, right? There was oh, she wants to go to the beach on Saturday. I'm like, what? Saturday's game day, right? It's D&D day.
And
Sure.
since Saul didn't have a girlfriend at the time.
Yes, right. I was, yeah, whatever. Let's not talk about that. It's a totally different experience, the way I grew up playing games, and traps weren't a big deal and weren't a big part of it.
A lot of people, traps are a part of it.
Right.
And I think it's interesting. How deadly do you want your traps to be?
Yes.
How many traps do you want? Do you want to tell your players there's traps? Puzzle traps sound different to me than, you step on, as you're walking into the tomb, you step on the wrong block and
Pressure plate.
and out come the poison arrows, right? Although that would be a good way to let your players know that there are traps, right?
I mean, once you pull that maneuver, then your players automatically know that there's traps in your game, right?
So they're going to start paying extra attention.
Especially
it's going to take you a very long time to get down that first hallway.
Exactly.
And every other hallway.
I'm not sure that's the kind of gameplay I want in my game. Now, like I said, if there's a way,
But you do use things like whenever there's magical items available that we have gotten from somewhere,
Okay.
or you find something, you will always. Everybody knows to do a detect magic or detect evil on the
Everybody
objects
does.
in our group
Oh, okay.
because sometimes you give us rings that want to control you. Sometimes there are jewels that are from evil. What do you want to call them? Evil shamans that have put curses on things, or there's a demon living in something. And so we've learned that, because you'll go, okay, you want that ring? That's fine. I need you to do a wisdom save, right? That kind of thing. So your traps are more subtle, as in it's not really it's a choice, right? Do you want to keep this and have whatever happen to you, or do you want to get rid of it? Right?
Yeah. Well, I don't.
Those are kind of traps, right? But they're subtle traps versus things coming out and slicing you in half.
Yeah, I don't know if those are traps. Those are like, I don't know. I guess they could be considered a trap, but a trap, to me, is something physical that happens to you, and the only decision you have in those sort of traps, well, not the only decision is, but either you bypass the trap, you disarm the trap, or you just don't go by the trap. You decide, well, or let's say you detect the trap.
Okay, I'm done. We're gonna leave the cave now.
Yeah, right. Or something like that. But like giving you a cursed item, I don't think that's a trap. It's a trapping, right? It's like, well, it's totally up to the player whether they want to accept the consequences of, it gives you this great power, but at a cost.
But you got to be careful with our players because some of them will go, okay,
No problem.
I'll put it in my bag of holding. Let's go.
No problem.
I'll only take it out when I need to.
Yeah, I'll only in dire emergencies, and all of a sudden there's a lot of dire emergencies. So traps are pretty interesting. Like I said, I have not looked at Grimtooth books of traps.
We looked at it yesterday, which was very interesting.
The physical books.
It was hilarious to look at it because they were these sketches of of what happens to the people. The one I liked was the first 3 people could walk over the pressure plate, but once they got off it, then the last person was thrown up in the air onto a bunch of blades. And I'm like, okay, that's not fair.
And that's funny because, like, he shows you the action of the trap, right? He shows you what the trap looks like before it's armed, and then while it's being triggered, and then what the result is. And so you have this little, like, a comic book sketch of these little figures getting slaughtered in multiple ways and maimed. And so it's pretty funny to look at, like I said.
But it wouldn't be so fun for your players to play, I don't think. I mean, maybe, and I guess it depends on the kind of game you want. If you told people that this is what was going to happen. Like when we played when Shannon ran that game about where they weren't cobalt. Were they cobalts that we played? Shannon, he ran that game with the little cobalts.
I don't remember.
Was it cobalts?
I don't remember.
We just played it in Palo Alto a couple months ago.
Oh, Kobolds Ate My Baby.
And
yes,
you knew that your character was going to die, right?
Most likely.
Yeah, you knew your character was going to die because they didn't have very many hit points and they
Oh,
were
that's
very
right.
stupid. But you knew what you were going into, right? So
Right.
there were multiple characters, or you could just use your same character sheet and change the name. So I just started crossing letters off of the name of my character, and because it was just
That's classic,
right? But you knew what was going to happen. So as long as you're not surprised that there's a trap every 2 feet, then I think it's okay if you want to stay in that hallway. Me myself, I would just say, okay, well, is it really worth it? How much are they paying me, and how am I gonna live, right?
Right. I guess what you're looking at is if you want to risk a valuable character that you've had for a long time, and some people might say, well, if I die in this game, it's not like it really happened, right?
Yeah, if it's a convention game and they just gave you a character that you have no investment in whatsoever, or you're a little cobalt, then, you know.
Most times when they run those kind of adventures at conventions, they want you to bring your own character, right? Because they don't want to give you a character that you don't care about. And so, sure, you can keep playing that character, but, it's a test against that character's abilities and
Something like the Tomb of Horrors, yeah.
And strength. Yeah, because there's other people try to mimic that kind of environment.
Well, and me myself, I would go into an adventure like that if they wanted me to bring my sorceress, who's 11th level. I would say, you know what? This is a dream, and this is what we're doing.
Sequence, yes.
Because I'm not going to let her die, right, in real life.
Real life. In real life. So, yes. So, traps are an interesting part of Dungeons and Dragons. They've been there since the very beginning. I just never utilized them very much. And so, I've never inflicted a lot of traps on my players. The odd trapped treasure chest or something like that, but usually the players are pretty savvy, and they do mage hand to open it, or do all kinds of weird things,
and I didn't know this, but Alan was explaining it to me because I had to ask somebody when I did a dungeon from the Dungeon Dojo or something from online. Do you remember what it was called?
No.
I had to ask Alan. I go, do treasure chests have their own experience points, or not experience points, hit points? He goes, yes, and he explained it to me. So if you can't break into a treasure chest, you can always kill it with your axe by beating it until all of its hit points go down. But some of these things had like 95 hit points.
Well, you destroy the box. So
yes, exactly.
It has structural hit points,
which I thought was ironic that you could, instead of just opening it, you could destroy it to get to the stuff.
But a lot of times, if there's a caveat, right? If there's something really valuable and can be broken in a trap, then bashing it to open it up is probably gonna break that valuable item that's in the trap.
We did have that discussion also.
In that treasure chest. And so a lot of people, that is the last resort, is beating the crap out of the
unless you have a barbarian in your party who gets who is enraged and doesn't want to wait.
So traps are an interesting thing to put in your game. I don't have any real experience in using them a lot. A lot of times the only time I would use them if it was in a module, and I don't usually run. Well, I can't say I don't usually run modules, but for some reason the modules that I've had, they hardly have any traps in them.
Or you skipped over them and not put them in.
Yeah, there's that. But I think I've never come across too many traps in my games.
But if you want to add some interesting, dangerous elements to your game, then. Right. Go for it.
Yeah, and surprise the heck out of your players.
Try not to kill them.
Try not to.
This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
You have a good day.